everyone, welcome back to another video. I'm Steven Reyes, head technician at Bellator CyberGuard. In this video we'll be talking about a WISP, what a WISP is, what some of the elements are, what attachments belong in it, some of the policies, and really why you as a tax preparer need to have a WISP in place. WISP stands for Written Information Security Program. Some say security plan. It's really semantics. Either's fine. Really, it's just a document stating that you have this security program in place and that you have what measures you have that you're taking to protect your clients. So, why is that required? First of all, on the W12 here, you can see anyone with a PTIN has checked this box under row 11 stating that they have a security program in place, that they have security protections for their taxpayer information. So if you have an active PTIN, you have said that and confirmed that you have this in place. If you have an active PTIN and you do not have this in place, quite frankly, you're committing a felony, right? So I'm sure everyone that has a PTIN has this in place, but just in case you do not, be aware of the legality behind that. So as far as the legality goes, the law behind it comes from the GLBA. Then the standards for safeguarding customer information from the Title 16 in regards to the FTC has Title 16 under Chapter 1, Subchapter C, Part 314, mentions and outlines everything that goes into this requirement, right? So in the GLBA, you'll essentially see that there is this requirement for financial institutions without so much detail. Then the more detail comes in under Title 16, right? So in Title 16, again, Chapter 1, Subchapter C, Part 314, if you want to look this up, Google that exactly, and it'll take you to the ECFR, which is like the electronic document and all of this, and you can see exactly really what's in this screenshot. I really just took a screenshot of at least this portion, 314.3, outlining the standards for safeguarding customer information. Then we'll also go into 314.4, which outlines all of the elements, what should be included. So you really have the requirement here, the information security program. So I won't read it exactly, but you need to have a comprehensive information security program that is written and accessible, that outlines all of the physical, administrative, technical safeguards to protect customer information. Then the objectives of this WISP, right? What's the point of having this WISP is to ensure the security and confidentiality of customer information, protect against any anticipated threats or hazards to the security or integrity of such information. So really anything you find in your risk assessment. You will do a risk assessment. We'll talk about that a little bit. And according to those risks that you have highlighted and recognized in your risk assessment, that you come up with controls to mitigate those risks. And lastly, protect against any unauthorized access to or use of such information that could result in harm or inconvenience to any customer. Right, at the end of the day, the point of this is to protect your clients, right? Client taxpayer information is very valuable to nefarious actors, right? If I am some sort of attacker that's looking to get this information, there's a reason they're trying to get that information, and the reason is because there's a lot of money that can be made with someone's tax data, right? You can take out loans or identity theft. There's a lot you can do with this sort of information, which is why we need to protect it, because it's information that attackers want at the end of the day. And if you don't have measures in place, you're a good target. So that was, again, 314.3. This is 314.4, right, the elements. So I've summarized. If you want to go and look again at the ECFR, just Google Title 16, Chapter 1, Subchapter C, Part 314. Again, please look that up yourself. I'll put a link in the description as well, so you can go to that site and look at the document yourself in more detail. But here I've kind of summarized, and we'll go over some of the key components of what's here, right? So first, they require that you designate a qualified individual, right? So it's kind of funny because the qualified individual doesn't need to have any sort of qualifications. So it's a very loose term in this sense, and there is no qualifications for this qualified individual. But the idea is to have somebody responsible for this security program, right? You appoint somebody within the organization, maybe the owner, whoever. It's up to, it varies from organization to organization. But you appoint somebody to be responsible for the security program and making sure that everything that's mentioned in here is being carried out and is actually true. And at the end of the day, right, if it's found that you just have this WISP, right, and you don't have any of the actual things that it mentions in place, then the WISP ends up being just a piece of paper, right? So there needs to be some follow-up. Otherwise, the person, this designated qualified individual, when there's a breach, right, they'll be responsible for not having anything in place. Okay, next, the security program should be based on a risk assessment. So essentially, we should have a risk assessment of all the risks we face and adequate controls to mitigate or accept those risks, right? So your security program will essentially be all of the software and physical and administrative controls that you have in place to mitigate the risks associated to your organization. And then we need to regularly test and monitor those controls. So the continuous monitoring requirement is the important thing to remember here. There is a requirement to have either continuous monitoring, which that essentially means a log of everyone accessing the network and any of the devices, and a timestamp associated to that, who's logging in, who's logging out, what time. So having continuous monitoring or having at least annual penetration testing and vulnerability assessments. So the continuous monitoring quickly becomes the more reasonable route to take here for this requirement, because the penetration testing can be very expensive. You're talking about tens of thousands of dollars, when continuous monitoring will not cost anywhere near that in any given year. So we should be providing training and utilize qualified personnel to manage and oversee the program, oversee service providers. So any service providers that we do contract with, we make sure that they're meeting their ends of the agreement, that they're only accessing information that they need to be, and really that they're just filling and meeting their end of the deal. Also establish an incident response plan. So essentially a plan that's in place that gives clear-cut directions on what to do in case of a breach. This will be followed by the PIO, and will be responsible for a lot of these steps and contacting the necessary authorities, ultimately the clients. And lastly, the qualified individual should report on the program at least annually. Depending on the organization, this will look different, but in an organization that has a board of executives, the qualified individual will report to them on any updates, what the success of it was, what needs to be changed, kind of where they fell short. Essentially just reporting. Again, a lot of these requirements are very loose to kind of, there's not like clear cut direction. So it's kind of report on, what you think is pertinent at the end of the year. All right, so now policies. This might not be the most fun part of the video, right? But we should have a list of all of the policies that we have in place in the organization as far as security controls go. within the WISP. So a lot of the WISP will be outlining all of these different policies. I won't go into all of them in detail. You have several listed here. You could definitely come up with more. Really, the responsible officials, who they are, and what they're responsible for, PII collection and retention, how long are we keeping PII, what's the kind of disposal process look like as well. A change management process, really step by step, what change management looks like and what that process looks like for any changes to make to the organization. Personnel accountability, PII disclosure, when we're disclosing PII, what does that look like? Reportable events, what other events are reportable, what qualifies as an event to report and follow that incident response plan. Electronic exchange of PII. This essentially is, encrypting data in transit, right? And any PII attachments being encrypted, password protected. Really, all of these policies can look different for different organizations, but what that process looks like and what those requirements are for exchanging PII. Network protection, so what measures do you have in place to protect your network? Are you using WPA3? Do you have your SSID set to not broadcast? Password requirements for your network, not having default passwords on employees' home Wi-Fi accounts. A lot of people work from home these days, so requirements for those employees working from home on their networks, their home networks that they're working from. Maybe having a VPN enabled all the time, or at least when you're remote. Having continuous monitoring enabled and running all the time to meet that requirement we were talking about. Access control, what granting access and removing access looks like. Wi-Fi and remote access, again, are you using a VPN? What your Wi-Fi settings is similar to network control. Any connected devices, so including like printers and other things, should be password protected. Anything that's on the device, on the network that you're working on, anything else that's connected to that network should be password protected. And a training program as well, what training looks like, what the training requirements are, what kind of training requirements need to be met before access to PII is granted to new employees, etc. Again, there could be a lot of other policies you could add here, and depending on the organization, there may be different ones. Some you may not need. These are probably the most basic policies that you'll see in most organizations, but you could definitely add to this list for sure. So some of the attachments, right? So at the end of the WISP, there's probably several different tables and documents that you would add to your WISP, including the IRP, right? Incident response plan. That's the data breach steps for the PIO. Clear-cut directions to take, so there's no confusion when there is a data breach. In the case of a data breach, or in the case of one of these reportable events, what steps to take for the PIO, exactly who to contact, what order to contact these people in, and these authorities. Any software to remain enabled, so what antivirus to remain enabled, the VPN, the RMM tool, EDR if you have EDR, firewall to be enabled. Really just an outline of everything that we should be using from a security standpoint. Employee and hardware inventory, just a log of what device is assigned to what employee, what their PII access level is. Do they have full access, partial access? Any security features, so all the different security features you're using. Remember, again, this is like a public document. You can make this available to clients, so listing these things just looks good for your clients as well, and showing everything you have in place. A lot of people are concerned with this. They're like, oh, well, what if an attacker, looks up my website, they go to my website and they see my WISP there, and they'll know my entire security program. And I see what you're saying, right, when I hear this, but at the same time, as an attacker, if I'm thinking like an attacker and I go to your website and I see you have a whole security program, I'm probably just not going to bother with you because I know there's thousands more of you, right, being tax preparers that don't have a whole security program in place. So it's probably more of a deterrent than, oh, okay, this is just what I need to beat. They have EDR, they have MDR, they have continuous monitoring. I just need to work through all these things. Like, probably not. They're just going to move on to the next guy that doesn't have anything, right? Why waste their time on the guy that has a whole suite, a whole security program, security stack in place? It's not worth the time. Any additional responsibilities, what that can look like for certain roles, and again, home, like remote work, what your responsibilities are as an employee working out of the office. It's very flexible. Any additional responsibilities you can add in your organization, and just like a simple outline of that. Your risk assessment, what those risks are, you can really just put like the level of severity and the impact, and then the control in place to meet that risk, right? And lastly, any additional reportable events. So you can put natural disasters or theft or really anything you can come up with that could apply and be an additional reportable event to then follow that IRP, that incident response plan, or data breach steps for PIO. All right, that about wraps it up for this video. Please visit bellatorcyber.com. We do offer WISP services. We'll make a custom tailored WISP for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and have a great rest of your day.